all you Gretas and Chutezcats out there. Welcome to Chapter 7, Section 2 notes. We're going to look at the role that humans play in the loss of ecosystem services. So humans are stupid and things are dying, and this is the section of the chapter that's going to go into detail. So you can remember all of them if you remember the word HIPPCO, H-I-P-P-C-O. So we're going to go through each one of these separately on different frames, but I'm going to introduce all of them to you now. So if you can remember HIPPCO, your test gets really easy. So H stands for habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation. And this is the greatest threat to species. If you don't have a home, you can deal with a lot of other stuff if you have a home to go to. But if you don't have a home, it's a lot harder to deal with those other stressors. Invasive species, which we spoke about in a former chapter, so that should make sense. Population growth and increasing use of resources. The more humans we have, the more stuff we need. Pollution is bad. Air, water, land, it's going to destroy something and affect animals. Climate change is another one, as well as overexploitation. So I'm going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail, and then we'll be done this set of notes. So loss of habitat species, once again, is the greatest threat to the species. So tons of different things that we do are going to either destroy, which is make go away all the way, or degrade and just make a lower quality habitat for wild species. So farming, industrial development, so building factories, aquaculture, which is where you kind of farm fish, oil and gas exploration, deforestation, and water diversion. So if I have a river and I make it go this way, then all the fish don't have a place to go. Tropical rainforests had suffered the greatest habitat loss. Let's move me here. There we go. And island species are especially vulnerable because they don't have anywhere to go. The Hawaiian Islands. A couple summers ago, we had that huge volcano go, and there was lava going over places in Hawaii. If it went over, the critters don't have anywhere to go, so they didn't make it. Habitat fragmentation. So when you fragment something, you're making small pieces. So when you have what are called habitat islands, these are formed by habitat fragmentation. They occur when intact habitats are divided into smaller patches by roads, logging, crop fields, urbanization. So that's going to isolate various populations of species, and it's going to make them more vulnerable to predators, disease, hazardous natural events. It's also harder to migrate, because maybe you have to cross a road now, or find mates, or colonize areas, or find food. So lots of issues happen when an area has been fragmented. That. Impacts of habitat loss. So here are 4 critters: the Indian tiger, the black rhino, the African elephant, and the Asian or Indian elephant. The light blue, the aqua blue, is where they were 100 years ago, where you could find them, and the purple is where you can find them today. So you can see as we are creating more habitat destruction, these amazingly gorgeous creatures have less places where they can live. So once again, that. So all of these things are endangered. So that's the H. I is for invasive species, and these are hardcore going to disrupt ecosystems. So we've talked about them in the past, but they prey on or parasitize or outcompete native species. 42% of the endangered species in the United States are due to invasive species brought in by humans. They can transmit new diseases. They can alter the structure or function of an environment. They spread rapidly due to few predators and other limits. They threaten human health and economics, and they can be, once again, introduced intentionally or accidentally, depending on the critter. Examples are things like Asian carp, kudzu vines, the red imported fire ant, Burmese python, and zebra mussels. So just some things to think about. So here's some more deliberately and accidentally introduced species. Deliberately introduced: purple loosestrife, the African honeybee or the killer bee, different from murder hornets. Kudzu, the nutria, and the European wild boar. And then accidentally introduced are things like the sea lamprey, the fire ant, Burmese python, termite, and zebra mussel. So just some more examples of invasive species. So prevention is the best way to reduce threats from invasive species, is prevent them from getting there in the first place. So once they're there, it's really hard to get rid of all of them. I could let you loose in the forest and say, okay, remove all the fire ants. Probably not going to happen. So Preventing them, research natural predators, parasites, bacteria that can be used to control invaders, develop better ways to track them, have an international ban on the transfer of non-native species, and educate the public, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm educating, and you guys are the public. So go home, talk to your parents, it's all good. Human population growth and pollution. So those are your P's. Human population is now, I think we're at 7.6 or 7 billion now, and we're predicted to reach 9.8 billion. So the exponential growth of human population is going to lead to a lot more resource use and therefore a lot more extinctions. So once again, more humans, more resources being used, more waste being created. And then you've got your pollution. Lots of chemicals, especially from the farms we use to make our food. So pesticide or fertilizer use has increased significantly. And then that's going to wash into the waterways and pollute the soil and the groundwater. DDT is an example of a pesticide impact on food chain. Now, this causes biomagnification or bioaccumulation in birds of prey. So you have a chemical that is found low in the food chain, and then it accumulates as it stays in the fat of the animal. So it goes up the food chain and becomes more and more and more. And then by the time you get to the top of the food chain, you have a lot of this chemical in your body, and it can cause some like hardcore stuff to happen. So biomagnification happens throughout the food chain. Bioaccumulation happens in one specific critter. And DDT was a pesticide that was used back in like the 70s and has been illegal since then, but you can still find it in humans today because it went into the waterways and into the fish and then up the food chain. So there you go. So once again, human population growth. And so this line is how many humans we have, and this is how many extinctions we have. Do you think there's a connection? Greenhouse gas emissions. So on to climate change. So atmosphere, and we're going to spend a bunch of time second semester talking about this, but we touch on it many times throughout the year. So atmospheric warming is a huge, huge threat. We're burning more fossil fuels, we're cutting down trees, and so we're not only putting more CO2 into the air, we're cutting down the things that pull it out of the air. So we have too much carbon dioxide, too much methane in the atmosphere. This could drive, with climate change, how it's projected, drive 1/4 to 1/2 of all terrestrial plants and animals to extinction by the end of the century. We have melting polar ice and glaciers, we have sea levels rising, we have oceans acidifying, much more extreme weather and habitat loss. And the most hardest hit are the species with those limited ranges or low tolerance for temperature changes. So there you go. And then last but not least, you can have loss of species due to overexploitation. So overharvesting. Bushmeat trade is you eat what you find in the jungle. So gorillas and jaguars could be consumed. Then you have the exotic pet trade of tons of birds, amphibians, reptiles, fish, things that are exotic, but people want to own them as pets because that's what we do as humans. We want to put everything in a cage and be like ours. You also have the illegal trade. Black market prices to make poaching worth the risk. Things like gorillas, tigers, pandas, rhinos, elephants. I want to own a stuffed panda and I will pay billions of dollars. So then somebody does it. So over exploitation is using something too much. And we're done with notes. So before I go, I want to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people do like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.